Hi, this is Jeremy Raddick. I was Gareth in the Doctor Who TV movie, and you're listening to Gallifrey Public Radio.
This is Gallifrey Public Radio, a weekly podcast dedicated to positive enjoyment of Doctor Who. We travel through classic and new episodes, explore the extended universe, and play a few games from time to time. We do discuss news, content that has been officially released, and the occasional interesting rumor, but we'll warn you before anything considered spoilers comes up.
Welcome to episode 375 of Gallifrey Public Radio, where we have the strangest craving for jellied eels. And now that we've said it out loud, it's gone. I'm Jay.
And I'm Kier. This week, Owen gets knocked around a bit, while Rhys and Gwen have it out verbally in the very aptly named Torchwood episode, Combat. Haley is still dealing with technical drama. So joining us in studio for today's discussion is a friend and frequent guest to the GPR studios, Julie. Julie, welcome back to GPR.
Hi, thanks for having me.
This is the first time we've had you on for a Torchwood rewatch, correct?
Yes, all right. First Torchwood.
But you consider yourself relatively familiar, if not adept, at Torchwood material.
I have been known to watch a Torchwood.
Okay, and read a few books.
And read a few books and meet a few people.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. All right. Well, we always begin these rewatch conversations with general high altitude, just sort of hot takes on the episode in question. So without going into too much detail about the mechanics or the execution of the episode and things of that sort, Jay, what was your general take on Combat, episode 11?
It's an episode about Owen getting the crap kicked out of him. How did I not remember this episode?
You'd think that'd be indelibly burned into your mind. Right. Fair. Okay. I won't ask you to expound on that just yet. But Julie, you just recently rewatched this one. How familiar, once you got a chance to go back and see this one, did it spark any memories? Or, I mean, was this one that you just looked at and said, I forgot that episode went by?
I remember it as the crux of when Gwen and Rhys have their fight, but after that, I mean, I also remember the spy aspect of Owen visiting the real estate office.
Right. Yeah, his
being
undercover work.
A weird moment where, sure, Tosh kind of laid out his website and things like that, but clearly Shell Corporation aspect and feel to it. So, yeah.
Okay.
I do remember it.
All right. Well, then I think with that said, as our tee-up, we'll dig a little deeper into this.
Started 10 minutes ago. What do you think it's doing?
I think it's weeping.
Why?
Owen's been studying this one. Thinks they have a low level of telepathic ability to share emotion across distance.
You mean it might be feeling the pain of another Weevil?
Kinda hope we're wrong, though.
Why?
Because that would mean somebody's not only kidnapping Weevils, they're causing them pain.
Now, one thing that I just wanted to note before we even get into this, because I think it sets, for me personally, this, as has been such frequently the case with Series 1 episodes like this, we'd go back and say, God, I forgot this aspect of it, or that aspect of it, or this episode entirely, or what have you. But this one, I had completely forgotten that this one was written by Noel Clarke.
Mm-hmm. I think when I watched Torchwood the first time through, I don't even think that registered because I've watched it so long ago.
Jay, did this even pop up on your radar back with your first familiarity with the stories?
No, I did not. I wasn't paying attention to writers very much when I went through it the first time. And I don't know why, but it just haven't really picked up on it since then. It was kind of shocking when I was reading it. I was like, oh, that's new.
And this was, I mean, I'm trying to place it timeline-wise, that he was still actively involved with, I believe, or just sort of maybe closing out his tenure on Doctor Who proper at this point?
This would have been like series 2 or 3 of Doctor Who, so he might still be doing like the occasional guest spot or something, but...
Right, getting around Stolen Earth and stories like that, the Return of Rose and that kind of thing. Sure.
Right.
Okay. Huh.
Right. Well, because, never mind.
What? Oh, you don't.
No
There's
spoilers?
there's no spoiler cone
No
here.
future spoilers.
No, absolutely
for
not. This is
Torchwood?
all fair. This is all fair game.
All fair game because it's okay. Well, so then at the end of this season is when Jack travels with the Doctor, which is somewhere connected to, I couldn't say exactly where, but like you see Jack in Doctor Who for that specifically, and they mention it, and then when he comes back for season 2, and I feel like it's before the end of things wrap with Mickey and
Martha. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So definitely he's involved at least somewhat here and there.
Right. Well, this was the beginning, I think, of RTD's true flex. It starts getting into, we start getting into some darker tones with Jack. This episode, maybe not a particular example of that, but we start getting into you see it, I should say, we see it in scenes from next week's episode, right? We won't get ahead of ourselves there.
Well, you do see him being questioned by Tosh. She says, we wouldn't be sending a human, would we? But you're sending the Weevil, and that's okay. And he just kind of looks at her, and then we have to figure it out. We need to know where they're going.
Right. Well, we've always gotten that weird omission of certain details from Jack, right? He does it from his team and has done it from his team historically, and by proxy, we as the audience have these gaps in the understanding of what's really going on. Whenever he alludes to something like something having to do with the rift or tinkering with time and things, we know, as Whovians.
You know what they use these warehouses in World War II?
Yeah, right. We get a greater understanding of that sort of thing, but when it comes to anything having to do with his origin stories and things of that sort, now that's that gray area where, as he's dancing around it and keeping his team unawares, we are equally unawares, and we're dying to know probably just as much as they are. Coming off the heels of where we were with the previous Torchwood episode, which feels, Jake, what is this? This is like months ago, right? So we have to remind ourselves where we pulled the needle up on the record.
The airplane?
Right. It was out of time. So it was the 3 people that came through sort of the Welsh equivalent of the Bermuda Triangle. and Owen falls for one of them quite hard, ridiculously hard in a very short amount of time, and is wearing that broken heart.
Too heavily?
Thank you. Thank you. Jay, what was your take on Owen's morose, woe is me, fie upon the world kind of attitude that ran pervasively through this episode?
I forgot that we're only one episode out. Just because it was so long ago that we watched that one, I thought we had at least 1 or 2 in between there, but I thought it was a little over the top, yes, but it felt right as we saw him actually open himself up and really get hurt for it, and it felt right that we needed to have something about that in there. He may have been playing it up a little bit too much, but it would have felt odd had there not been anything. So
right, maybe it was necessary to sort of sell it to a certain degree.
This is the only place in the story where this episode could have happened, though. I think in terms of his arc, he could only be this emotional and get caught up at the end of this, even though he thinks what this group of people are doing is crazy. He also recognizes that for him, it's a chance to experience that complete relief and release when he goes in to fight the Weevil. That is the calm that he feels, and he was ready to die because he feels so let down by Jack, by Diane, by all of these people. It's literally the only way that he could have reacted to that. Granted, yes, it was over the top, and he's had one serious relationship in his life, and that's how far off the deep end he goes.
Yeah.
No previous spoiler, pun intended. But yeah, I just think that it was way too much. But if this episode had happened a few later, he would have been way over it by then because he and Gwen will have still been fighting. And I think it's still fresh in most people's minds as they're watching the season that he's just been left.
Yeah, it definitely felt right coming off of that. And like I said, if there had been like an episode in there, I don't think it would have thrown it off too much. But no, the ability to just like have him fully, you know, I mean, this is full breakup mode, and we've all kind of been there, and we can all kind of relate to it too. Mm-hmm. So there's that moment when, you know, when he goes into the cage and he's just like, you know, just come on, bring it. Like, I mean, that's something that most people can, you know, it can equate to. Like I've been there. I understand that. Like it's one of those moments, one of those rare moments when Owen is a sympathetic character.
To a point.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To a point. He's still a twat.
Well, and that's the one of the things that really got me was like through most of this, you're kind of like you're meant to feel for him. Like he's going through a lot. He is trying to hold it together the best he can, kind of thing. But you know, there's like I said, there's that moment where you really feel what he's going through. But then at the end, he, you know, kind of does the power play for the Weevil they have and it's like, oh, right, this is Owen we're talking about. Never mind.
Right.
Just
okay.
erase all that.
That final moment, I know we're sort of, you know, we're leaping to the closing credits here, but that's just to sort of finish this little character arc here. That snarling little power play moment, as you describe it, says a lot on a lot of levels, I feel. Says quite a bit about Owen and the fact that, you know, you can go ahead and you can strip away a lot of the other bravado, you can strip away the whatever, the sleazeball or whatever monikers you want to put all over him from time to time, which he loves to demonstrate for us. Mm-hmm. But even when you get him down to his raw points, where he's at that moment where, you know, as we saw him in the cage, he's willing to just throw in the towel and say, well, that's it. I've got nothing. I've spiraled down as far as I can possibly go, so I'm going to close my eyes and let this happen. But even as he gets pulled back out of that nadir, right, he is still, his only means of, or his go-to means of remedying this horrible state that he feels that he's in, that he knows that he's in, is to say, you know what, I got to fall back on my own practices. I got to be the prick again, because that's how I know I'm safe. And the walls start going back up. He could have gone through even just the slightest character change, or found one moment where, you know, the whole looking into the Weevil's eyes kind of thing. Like there was a split second where that could have been it. Mm. He could have been looking through the partition and then said something like, I know where you've been, or I know where you are, or something. But instead, he decides to do this. So, congratulations, Owen, you're back.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think what I did not remember about this episode and Torchwood in general is the speed at which all of the episodes and the seasons travel. Mm. And by that, I mean that Owen has just been thrown around so much, but he fell in love over the matter of 2 days, and then she left, and then it can't have been that much time in between, and it's just, the transitions are always so fast, whereas, and maybe it's more modern TV where you do see they allow for time to pass in between episodes where they're figuring things out and they'll reference that. And I think that you don't get that in Torchwood, which pushes their sense of urgency, which is kind of the nature of the show. But I did not remember that when I think back on it. And now watching some of them again, I kind of remember that it's just everything changes. And that's literally how they pace the show. I
like the fact that you can't actually tell how much time has passed between the previous episode and this one. It could be a couple of days. It could be a couple of weeks. Probably not more than that, because Gwen and Reese haven't had it out yet. In fact, they're still sort of trying to have the nice dinner out kind of thing. So it looks like
we don't know. He said one night, and I don't know if that means one night a week, one night a month, one night a year.
Right.
What's that
I think that's left intentionally vague.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So we've got that set up now, which is the sort of the B story here, and that has to do with the how did Jack put it about don't let it drift?
Yeah.
All right. So the drift, the drift alongside the rift.
But
Well, but because I've always been Team Reese, this episode in particular, I both love the lunk and I hate him. He is very quick to lash out. Now, granted, some of this is Noel Clarke's writing. It's his interpretation and the way that he draws a beat on these characters in the first season. You know, he's working off the same production Bible and character synopses that every other writer this season is working with. So depending on how quickly they were, throwing these productions together and getting a general feel for the cast of characters that were provided by Russell and Julie. Different Julie. The executive producer.
I think I would have known.
How involved were you? But he decided that he was going to have a hurt Reese, when he really starts feeling like he's being affronted or being led wrong, lashes out with some really nasty, like his language, his slams. He's very cutting in that regard.
She was straight up ignoring him the entire dinner. He was talking and she was not even eating and not even looking at him. So
yeah,
if she does that to him all the time, and this was his last ditch try to pull her back, and we're going out in public, we're going to spend our night together, and that's what you get.
I don't know. Well, but we can only go with what we see, right? And we just see him blow up, dropping F-bombs in a restaurant and that kind of thing. I don't know. Jay?
We've seen it happening like a lot where he's been left behind. He's been, wanting time with his girlfriend, things like this, and it's been building up to this point, and this might seem like a jump from where we last saw them, but I don't feel like it's out of place. I think that it is exactly what it needs to be. It's Reese having that moment of like he thought he finally got the night with his girlfriend, and he thought this is gonna be great and things are gonna, and he had the whole plan in his head, and all of a sudden she starts ignoring him, and then then she goes to run off after this weird thing that he doesn't even understand what he just saw.
Right.
And it all kind of comes to a head at that point. And I feel like that's exactly how I would react in that situation. I think, maybe not to that extreme, but you can relate to it. It is that moment of utter frustration. And I love that it's not held back. You have that real relationship moment where he's tired of everything and he snaps, and Gwen is like, oh no, we're not going to have this right now, but no, this is not a thing. It's like
because
it feels like an actual relationship.
I have to run.
Yeah. To notice they've never met before, Jack and Reese. She goes, oh, hey, this is Reese. Don't say that to me in front of him. This is my boss. She's clearly putting that relationship with Jack above her relationship with Reese. So I would be mad if I were him. Yeah,
and she's not just handling it in that regard. She's starting off the introductions by driving a wedge. Right. But then you bookend that with how she decides to do damage control, which I am still trying to wrap my head around. That she wants to get an apology that she can then retcon, literally.
She just needs to hear him say it so that it was a possible outcome ever, but she's so selfish. Yeah, she doesn't want to actually come to terms with what she's done, but she wants to understand that he is capable of forgiving her. And that's all she's looking for in that moment.
Which just goes to show, for all of the examples of strength and bravery and selfishness that she puts into her work, on a personal level, she is cowardly, by my definition, and
I think
selfish.
by most definitions.
Yeah. So she is the absolute inverse. So the bravery and the selfishness in the field is mirrored by the selfishness and cowardice at a personal level, and those two, obviously, we see this abrasion, and I just don't envy Reese in the morning. That poor sap, he thought he had 2 pints and he's going to wake up with a wicked hangover. Part of that, though, is Gwen's character, in that she is pretty reckless, and even in her ability to function as a good officer, it's about saving
people in general, but it's not ever necessarily about her being a good, like her as a good detective, but not her as an empathetic person. It's very calculating, and she can connect the dots, and that is what she's always been good at. And I think that's why Jack picked her, but I think that's why Jack tells her that she needs to not drift and to focus on Reese, because she needs to connect with that part of her life. Otherwise, she will completely lose herself to this otherworldly and very callous nature of things, which is who Jack is.
She seems to, at times, demonstrate to the rest of the team this concern for the fact that they are not being aware or cognizant or respectful of the harm that they are putting people at risk or the damage that they're doing to people's lives. But it always seems to be the case when it's removed from her own. So she's capable of that, but she just can't bring it home, literally. That's a really interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, and it is interesting seeing her have that moment by herself in the hub when everybody else is gone, and she realizes just how messed up her life is.
The pizza of sadness.
Because it has pineapples on it. Who does that to
right?
pizza?
I've never seen someone sob while chewing a pizza like that.
It's because those were the last 2 pizzas that late at night, and they said, you could have these. They were left over, and they made her cry.
Yeah, and it was pineapple, and pineapple with extra ham. And it led her to tears.
So sad.
as it should.
Yeah, there you go. Well, all in all, I have to say that I am going back to Clarke as our writer. I'm genuinely impressed with being able to pull together an episode that maintains a very straightforward A and B story. They intertwine often enough to be able to kind of execute as needed, but this is Fight Club.
Yeah.
On almost every level, including, nearly down to the speech that the real estate D-bag starts giving to Owen about property and belongings and things like that. And it sounds almost like Tyler Durden giving the, you are not your furniture, you are not your apartment. It's way too close. Way too close.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I described it. My girlfriend didn't actually watch this one with me. She was like, "Oh, which Torchwood episode was this again?" And I was like, "The Fight Club one." She goes, "Oh, okay, yeah."
Yeah.
Like it's the parallels are. It's carbon copy. It's the hey, can I borrow your homework? Yeah, just change it up a little so it doesn't look like you copied.
Not to say that it isn't an entertaining episode, though.
It served its purpose. And here's the one thing. They did not follow Fight Club rules, so I don't think it's an exact copy. They were bringing friends left and right.
They were bringing friends. Well,
they did not have rule number 1.
Yeah, that's true. But they did have to have the pre-fight. You had to qualify, except Owen.
Well, they said that was warm-up.
Yeah.
He just didn't get a warm-up.
I will say that in that whole sort of reimagining of the way that it works and sort of turning the mystery back around, sort of inverting that mystery, when they're sitting there in the hub in the first act of the show and they're trying to realize, like, why does he have human, injuries, look like they were inflicted by a human before unleashing Weevil on him. So that sort of, that idea of like, how are you leading the authorities around and sort of giving them the wrong sense, so to speak, with the way that this has been executed, it was interesting. I like the fact that was sort of woven together that way. I don't know how you could do a story like this without it really feeling like Fight Club, unless there's just no way to do it without it feeling like Fight Club.
I think that the Fight Club aspect of it is kind of central to the story. Otherwise, how do you have bodies showing up in abandoned warehouses and people not willing to talk about their injuries to anyone, even after Jack says, "Hey, I know what did this to you," and he still said, "No, that they'll know it was me." So I don't think that you can.
Well, not really knowing how pervasive the underground executive ring fighting scene really is.
There were a lot more people up in those balcony areas yelling down at them than I thought there should have been.
That maybe this is a much bigger scene than we realize, and the pit fighting thing, with or without aliens.
But hey, kudos to them for figuring out how to mass text back then.
Yeah,
the
right.
address.
That's true.
And not clearing out people from, the dead one who literally died at your last fight from your phone directory to send them the text.
Yeah, right.
Well, he was dead. He couldn't reply stop to anything.
Yeah. You have to reply stop to unsubscribe. And he was a little slow on that response, being on a slab and all.
Dead.
Yeah. So, well, there you have it. A worthy inclusion to the season overall, Jay?
Yeah, I think so. It gives a little bit more consistency to the characters.
That's true.
So I always enjoy it when we actually see continuity with the characters, and this really does kind of we're getting the follow up from Reese and
Gwen.
And then you get the follow up with Owen. So there's a lot of things that this is not one that you can jump in the middle of the season and know what's going on, really.
Right.
There's a lot that leads up into it, and I enjoy the fact that we're at that point now in the season.
Yeah, and not to throw things too far down the road, but we see from the scenes from the next episode that our primary action is happening around the two characters, well, two of the three characters who really weren't intrinsically involved with this, who don't have to do some internal work and a little soul searching. So while Gwen can go and deal with her pile of poop, and Owen can go try and figure out how he can get back on his jerk horse again, we'll let Tosh and Jack go off and have an adventure that doesn't require a lot of backstory or baggage other than Jack's, large set of luggage. But other than that, we'll get to that when we get to that.
I liked the complexity of it and how you had a lot of moving parts, and it took people being in the right place at the right time to keep the story going, but none of it ever felt like it was shoehorned in to make it happen.
True.
It felt very natural, like having Gwen show up at the last minute at the hub to hear the text, and having Owen be in a fight at the bar where he just happened to be, and the timing of that so that it was this guy just walks up and punches him. If there had been any conversation there, then the person who he's with that thought he's new to town would not have believed it. So all that kind of stuff, I feel like it did all play well together, and I liked that about this episode.
Yeah, nice tee-ups for all those key components.
And it didn't feel like it was contrived in any way. It made sense for a story.
Yeah, logically it was solid. You really couldn't complain about any of it. It was just it made a lot of sense, and aside from some of the characters being a little over the top at times, not too bad.
I like it all in all. And knowing, if you sort of look at your calendar and say, okay, well, this is 3 or so episodes before we wrap up the first season, I think they're maintaining the upward curve that the back half of season 1 was on, for sure.
Agreed.
Yes.
We didn't think there was going to be a whole lot of news right now because obviously with the entire world nearly locked down and the fact that a lot of productions have come to a screeching halt, we didn't think there was going to be much that we were going to add on to. Although last week we started to set a bit of a precedent for past and present showrunners and talent and writers and production staff coming to the forefront and saying, we've got some time to spend with you, the consuming audience. We are fans as well. Let's celebrate some of this stuff together, right? And we had so many stories. We had the prequel to Rose. We had the explanation of what was going through the 13th Doctor's head as she fell from the TARDIS in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, 42. We had... I'm sorry, help me on the third piece from last week. My brain is starting to go woogie poop. It was Stephen Moffat adding to Day of the Doctor, right? And giving us that extra little bit of fun with Dan Starkey. So in keeping with the let's all go rewatch some of our favorite stories together, we happen to have an opportunity with what has just passed with Vincent van Gogh's birthday. So what else are you going to watch? But if we're going to go and rewatch it collectively around the world, let's have some of the people involved with it share their thoughts live time. Because it's like doing a convention watch along with, well, we thought it was just going to be two people, right? I think, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong. I think originally it was just going to be Karen Gillan and Tony Curran.
Originally, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
That's how things were shaping up to begin with, yeah.
But the list grew.
A little bit. Apparently, Matt Smith decided to take a page out of Stephen Moffat's book and created a Twitter page or Twitter account for this specific instance.
Twitter.
Twitter.
On the Twitter. So he creates a temporary account to do a live tweet along with it. And then our writer, Richard Curtis, joins in as well. So you've got all of this really great, it almost becomes like an AMA, right? So everybody's they've got just as many people that are commenting on the episode are also volleying questions towards our principal creators and talent to sort of get their insight on all this. And the great thing about it is all of this really interesting conversation stems out of it. We had Matt Smith stated when he was talking about Bill Nighy's uncredited appearance as the Louvre curator, that he believed in his head and heart that Bill Nighy's character was a future iteration of the Doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, which kind of blows your mind a little bit. You know, you can go ahead and you can grapple with that one for a little bit. But then we get something very, very personal from the story writer, Richard Curtis, when he is asked about his personal connection to this particular story and why he chose to write it, take this particular story on, this point in history, this particular historical figure, and delve into this topic. And he shares the story of losing his sister to suicide. And it becomes something where, but the way he dresses it is really, I think, the most important aspect of it. And it's something where it is not a matter of trying to bring everyone to a halt to mourn, but more of a please recognize what you have while you have it. Stay in contact with one another. Please make sure that you are, as Amy attempts to be, that face, that voice. Mm-hmm. It's a message that cannot be repeated often enough. And I'm kind of glad that as beloved as this story is, that this conversation needs to continue, and that it keeps being brought back to our attention, that we need to keep focusing on it.
Yeah, it really was touching to kind of read into some of the the thoughts and the heart behind a lot of it. And I mean, it took an episode that I already put it was already in my the top of lists, and just made it that much more impressive.
Yeah, I think the more we find out about it, and we continually do, depending on who it is that we're communicating with or who we get interviews from, or just going back to watch it again and catching some of the extra depth of detail that is put into it, the care, sort of the labor of love that was done with this particular story. And then obviously every time we ever get to hear Tony Curran speak at a kind of things like that, or bump into him in hallways and things. He's
amazing person.
so giving to the fan base for a single character appearance. The Whovian community has latched onto him in a way that they're never going to let him go, ever.
Oh no. He's part of the family for life.
Oh, absolutely. Now, the other little bit of news that came about that I think is kind of interesting, well, not necessarily news, but it is a bit of an analysis. It's a sort of just letting people know or making you aware of the fact that as we are all looking at so many productions and so many plans for upcoming series that have now been backburnered indefinitely because of COVID-19 concerns and rampant spread, frankly, that somehow, call it serendipity or call it just the fact that the odd delays that this particular series or this particular program go through in its production cycle somehow threaded the needle. So it will not actually impact what we have been told, what we were told a few months ago would be the planned rollout for stories to come.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about we've got the holiday special coming up, which we know has already finished principal photography. So at this point it's all post-production, which can, if it's not already all completed, can be done remotely.
No, I think it was already in the can. I think it was October or so of like last year that they started and ran through everything. I think it's all in post.
I thought so as well. But
yeah,
I mean, I don't see where that would get interrupted. And yeah.
And they had planned when it came to Series 13 proper, they had already said that they weren't. They had just gone and done location shoots, just going out to scope locations prior to a lot of the travel restrictions and things that we're dealing with now. They weren't planning on doing principal photography until autumn of this year, which we're hoping, knock on anything that you choose to, will be the point where we'll start seeing some alleviating of a lot of these the travel bans and everything else that's keeping us from being able to do anything other than our talent shooting TikTok and Instagram videos in their flats,
right?
As lovely as they are. But yeah, I think we should stay relatively on schedule, which is great.
Yeah, it's surprising but fantastic. So at least there's one thing.
Yeah, I'm curious. I want to see if we can reach out a little bit either to Jason Haig-Ellery or to Nick Briggs and find out about how this really impacts a lot of Big Finish's work. They may have made some statements in that regard. I haven't checked their blog in the last couple of weeks to see how they're handling this, but because of the fact that they could feasibly do sort of isolation booth recordings and things of that sort, and all of their post-production is all done just a sound engineer or two in their studio at a time. I would imagine that they proceed apace.
Right. You'd have to wonder how much of them, they've said many times that they have everyone come into their studios, but that it could be done remotely if it needed to be done to continue producing content versus just, we like to have everyone there.
Right. I know they send gear out to Tom Baker's.
Feel that's a special case.
It is a bit of a, he gets a little preferential treatment.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but it could very easily be converted to the norm. So.
Of course. Well, and we've talked to a few people who say that anybody who does regular voice acting work, they have studios in their own homes because why not? It's a home office.
Yeah. Didn't they kind of set up sort of a Big Finish West out in LA so that Barrowman would have something closer to his home base? I think
maybe.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I mean, it may not have been necessarily. It may have been more of just some actual studio space that was closer to him so he could do his work. But I would not be surprised if he already had, as you said, a lot of voice acting talent, has at-home rigs, or at least the ability to be able to soundproof one of their many walk-in closets.
If not, Amazon.
There you go. Get the sound baffles. So yeah, I'm very pleased that nothing's gonna delay our already eager anticipation of more Who content beyond whatever holiday of 2020, whatever they call that holiday season, be it December or January.
I don't know, week 97 of COVID something, or I don't know.
Don't know. I'm not going to count them because this has been the longest March on the history of all Marches.
It was a great year.
I got a message today. It's like, for anyone that's lost count, today is March 97th.
It's true.
I'm Joe from PopX Cast, where science fiction meets pop culture. Part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find more stunningly awesome geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Well, next week, we're going to be coming back, and we're going to start up our games again. This should be fun.
Yep.
Going to take our mind off things.
I figured we were going to play a sort of an extended version of what grew out of our Oh No Who Didn't convention game show. And we are going to do a full length, or as near full length as I can come up with categories for probably the best round that we do in that, which is Fire, Retire, Admire. So for those unfamiliar who have not gone back through our back catalog or have seen us do this game show at conventions, the premise behind it is very similar to the well, I can't really say what the name of the originating game is because it's got a dirty word in it.
Right, the Marry F Kill.
Right, that one. So fire, retire, admire just says if you're going to take an individual from the cast of characters that you are presented with that all sort of follow a similar Whovian category, like say, I don't know, male companions between 30 and 35. I'm just making this up. Who would you fire outright, never to be allowed back on the show again? Who would you retire that would leave the show but would go out in glory and laud and honor? And who would you admire? Who would stay on the show forever, would never be allowed to leave? I mean, other than Wilfred Mott. So we will we'll definitely get a number of rounds of that. And I may throw one or two practice rounds out on the social media channels so that people can get familiar with the format and have some fun with some contributions of their own. So that's that.
All right. Well, this has been episode 375 of Gallifrey Public Radio. Until next week, this is Jay saying, the first rule of Gallifrey Public Radio... No, wait, that's not it.
And this is Keir saying, I want you to hit me as hard as you can because I'm Jack Harkness and I'll heal.
And this is Julie saying, the Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down.
And Julie, thank you so much for joining us for another episode. It's been a pleasure having you.
Great. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys next week.
Allons-y.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Gallifrey Public Radio. Want to keep the conversation going? You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Or just send us a good old-fashioned email to feedback@gallifreypublicradio.com. You can also give us a phone call at 754-225-5477. That's 754-CALL-GPR, and you may hear your voice on a future episode of the show. Everything's got to end sometime, otherwise nothing would ever get started. Join us next week for a brand new episode.
Vincent. Gallifrey Public Radio is copyright 2020. See you next week.
It's so... I thought you would be happy I did not say it then.
Why would I not want you to maintain the standard to which I've grown accustomed?
Have you heard some of the we say?